Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education, a podcast that focuses on what is happening in education today, connecting everyone to the movers and shakers that are breaking boundaries in the education arena.
Hello, welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education. Jerri has come back from a really great conference. She's very energized. Our guest was there too. Really great topics. And a lot of those topics at the conference and most conferences are some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. The pandemic has been awful, but it also has some silver linings, as we have discussed many times. And a lot of what the pandemic has done is shed light on some issues that have been there, and maybe we were grappling with, but then we kind of had to take a halt. But now the light has been shown really brightly on a lot of these issues. So we're going to talk about these issues today and really tie into what Microsoft is doing with our guest today.
Yes, thanks, Jamie. Serena Sacks-Mandel is on some COSIN committees that I'm on. And we were taught, COSIN does a lot with policy and making sure that policy moves forward to really amplify education and not pull it back, right? And so we were on a committee together. And, when we had Kevin Honeycutt on the show, he said, you attract these lightning bugs or fireflies, and you need to get them in your jar so they light up the world. Well, when I was listening to Serena, I was like, this is a lightning bug we need in the jar. She was talking about the things that are happening in education, the things that are keeping people up at night. And also, not only was she talking about those, but what are some solutions? So she comes from a rich background of education, and now she is the general manager for customer success for the entire nation for Microsoft. Ooh, that's pretty impressive, Serena. So tell us a little bit about your background, how you got to Microsoft.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on. And it's just such a pleasure. We could just talk for hours and hours, but we're not going to. We'll keep it in. So I have about 25 years of corporate work in IT, starting with IBM and then Walt Disney World, kind of climbing the corporate ladder. And then about a dozen years ago, I had an epiphany that I can use my powers for good, that I can use my organizational leadership and technology expertise to transform education, to help all students discover their gifts and achieve their goals, and to leverage technology in a way that enables and empowers teachers to give the students more. And
so what did you do with this epiphany?
Thank you for asking. Yes. With that epiphany, I joined Florida Virtual School, which is the oldest and largest K-12 online school. It has about 650,000 students all over the world.
Yes.
And they make the highest quality digital curriculum. So at Florida Virtual, it lit up my brain. I was like, wow, this is how we can personalize education for every student and meet them where they are. And then I said, what are school districts doing? How can we take this kind of a model and use it for our traditional brick and mortar public schools? Because we need to reach even more students. So I looked around at what districts were leveraging technology to transform education for their students. And lo and behold, Fulton County Schools, which is north and south of Atlanta, very, very diverse district that is basically a microcosm of the rest of the country. It has suburban, urban, and even rural areas within the district. They were implementing personalized learning at scale, not just with devices. A lot of organizations, started off in the early days just throwing devices at students. That's not the answer. It really starts with the teachers, helping teachers understand how to leverage models that personalize the education. Oh, and then the device is just a tool for the students and the teachers to get ahead. So I joined Fulton County Schools as the CIO, and we, as a team, this is a huge team effort, very important to partner academics and IT for these large transformative efforts. And so great teamwork. And we help teachers learn how to do this. The students, of course, took duck to water in a duck, the pond to a duck. I don't know what the analogy is, but the students know how to use devices, right? So we actually had geek squads of students helping the teachers and helping the other students get set up. So it was about a multi-year effort to train the teachers and then roll out the devices and all of the infrastructure and content and assessment, all the things that go with it. And we saw graduation rates go up, AP, more students across more diverse backgrounds taking AP and advanced courses and thriving. And then towards in 2020, we won the CIO 100 award for turning around failing students and schools using personalized dashboards that we gave to students and schools. So we had a baseball card with every student's picture and their stats refreshed nightly, that they could create this win room and help the teachers focus the students either on literacy or numeracy or whatever they needed to catch up. And over a year and a half, we got 13 schools off of the failing list.
So what is the dashboard exactly?
It's all data. So at the end of the day, it all starts with data. And we're seeing more and more schools, districts, universities understand the power of the data. The data comes from your student information system, from your learning management system, from your assessment system. It's grades, it's behaviors, discipline, attendance, and most importantly, formative assessment. We have to be doing regular formative assessments so that we constantly are checking in on how the students are doing. And this has to be almost transparent to the learning process. We don't want to keep taking students out of learning to test them. It raises stress levels. They don't do their best, and they're not necessarily actionable. What we want is just in time, quick quizzes, oversight, just watching students, how they're performing, doing exercises gives you formative assessment information. You can see whether they're moving through the content and curriculum when it's a digital format.
Right. So teachers would look at this dashboard and students would look at the dashboard to see where they are and where they need to move forward.
So that's a great point. The more that we can have students own their own learning, the more intrinsically motivated the individual is to achieve. So it's not the teacher telling them you need to learn, they get this innate sense of competition with their peers, and they get excited when they get a badge or they see that their scores are going up. Yeah, so it's really important for the students to see how they're growing and learning and achieving too.
Sounds a little gamified. Was it gamified?
Yes.
You had badges and
yeah.
Oh,
Students love that.
Yes,
Students
that's
love
a hook.
that.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
authentic ownership. And it seems like you are certainly muscled up for any type of pandemic that might occur in 2020.
And we were. So we were the first large district to pivot to remote. We were very tuned in. Atlanta, Georgia was an epicenter of the pandemic, and we were watching the numbers. We were in an executive task force, like 6-8 hours a day, watching the numbers, figuring out what to do if, doing scenario planning. And when we saw the numbers start creeping up, and in our district we got hit, we're like, that's it. We have all the technology to go remote. Let's do it. And we did. There were students that had left their laptops at school, or some populations that didn't have laptops. I literally handed out laptops. I literally sat in rooms reformatting and setting up devices for students.
Yeah, but you were ahead of the game, because it wasn't like you were deploying them for the first time and kids are using them for the first time. You were authentically using them, implementing and not having technology as the lead, but leveraging technology to get that time back for the teachers so that they can, and they were all set up and ready to build relationships that were slowly being broken down because of the pandemic. We have this, literal wall now because there are, remote, and it seems that your staff was almost, really prepared for it. No one was prepared for it, but you were ahead of the game for sure.
Yeah, Jamie, you're absolutely right, except that we still had challenges with internet access and with space constraints, even with teachers. I mean, when we had to go remote, even I was like, okay, where am I going to work versus my husband? And how are we going to manage our space to be a work and live? So, we can't, it was not easy for anybody, but yes, we were ahead of the game. We had the technology in place, and we had the mindsets, right? That's the most important thing, that teachers were used to using technology in their class, and now they just needed to use it remotely.
And the culture was there for it.
Right.
That's great.
Culture was there, and you were also, I mean, you said it before, you referenced it before, the instructional strategies were in place, and that's where it needs to start. It's not about all of the tech tools. You have to have those instructional strategies in place, and then all of the ed tech, the tech tools, those are there for you to leverage in best ways. And you had that going.
Exactly. And then, Jerri, back to your original question, how did I get to Microsoft? Because I never really got to that. So here I am pivoting to remote, and I got calls from New York City. I got calls from other, like, what do we do? And I'm like, well, we've been doing this for 6 years. Like, so I thought, oh my gosh, we really are onto something here. I am pulled and driven to help the industry, help districts across the country and world, and even elevate that to university level. And so I actually reached out to Microsoft, and I said, I really want to make a bigger difference. And it turned out that they were setting up the customer success area within Edu. And it was a perfect fit. I mean, this is just such a great fit for me, because customer success is all about helping customers to be successful with what they've already purchased, what they're already using, and then being observant of what problems are still existing and seeing how we can help solve those problems for customers. So I have an amazing team that is technical and knowledgeable and helpful and passionate about serving the edu industry and our customers, and ultimately our students, who are the future innovators and leaders of tomorrow. So I've been there about 1 year and 3/4, and it is an amazing organization, and we really serve the edu industry. I'm so excited about the tools that we have built and are deploying for education specifically. And I think the more people look into what is Microsoft doing for education, the more they see that these are world and life-changing tools. Like, for example, Reading Progress. So Reading Progress is an AI-based tool that's in Teams. It's not an additional purchase. It's part of your Teams, part of your Office 365. Actually helps students develop fluency. It's the first of its kind. Now, this is obviously a great tool for younger learners so that they learn to read by 3rd grade, takes time off of the teacher's calendar so that all the students can learn to read at the same time. They don't need a separate adult listening to each one. And it helps the students have less stress because they're reading to a computer, not a person. So there's no stigma. So we're finding when students use Reading Progress, then they want to read aloud, whereas they might have been shy to do it before. And it isn't just for those early readers, it's for English language learners and adult literacy. So we're seeing that getting picked up at career and college centers within universities as well. So it's a great worldwide tool that if we can get every student learning to read by 3rd grade, that's world changing.
I have a question about it, Serena. Do
Sure.
they read into the computer and then hear themselves back?
So, and I could share the video of it, but when you see this, you just light up because
Yes.
the student reads to the computer tells you where you're struggling and helps you sound out the word. And so that you then learn, and the data goes to the teacher so they can see where the students are struggling and give direct instruction as well.
You know what I like about that? What the tool is doing is allowing the student to get to a point where they need help. So instead of some of the reading tools that I see already provide that scaffold up front, whether they need it or not. Here, it's letting the student get to that conflict first, struggle through a little bit, and then providing that support.
Yes. And it uses visual cues to help students sound out the syllables and the words. And so it's a visual and audible tool. And it's actually better than a human, right? Because I know when I was reading with my kids, you jump in, no, it's like this, right? Well, the computer knows better when to jump in and when not to. So it's an amazing tool that helps students learn to read, and it helps develop fluency. So I'm super proud of that. And they've actually just enhanced it. So there was Reading Progress, and now there's Reading Coach. So we just keep enhancing these tools to help students.
And this is in the Teams environment?
Yes, as part of Teams. Oh, the other point is that for
education,
students that Yeah. Teams for Education. It's an education, product. If students have a disability, so the other thing is we've leaned very heavily into disability. So dyslexia or hearing impaired or sight impaired, dyslexia students benefit from this. We have a dyslexia font. We have tools within these reading progress that help those students with those disabilities to overcome them.
This is a eureka moment because we're trying to address dyslexia in school districts and they don't know where to go. They feel like they need some tools in the toolbox. This is perfect. I am so glad that this is happening for students.
That's what I'm saying, that it's like, I feel grateful to be in a company that cares so much about education.
Right.
And accessibility. We all got certified in accessibility so that we are sensitive to it and understand it. And what we find is that when we build products for accessibility, the general population adopts it too. So just a simple example is you can make your arrow on your screen bright colored and bigger, and we did it originally for sight impairment. But I don't know about you, but I make my arrow bigger because
I have it too,
I'm like, where'd my mouse go?
Right. It really does personalize the experience to a level that a teacher could not do in an evening. I mean,
exactly.
I can't go home as the reading teacher and totally personalize all 30 lessons for everyone.
So just a data point on that, and I know we're talking a lot about reading, but it's so critical to student success. And these kids that haven't been in school for 2 years have got to catch up. So normally it takes a teacher, this is research-based, about 2.5 months out of the first semester. So that's a good amount of the first semester to even identify the lexile for each student. With reading progress, it takes 2 weeks.
Wow. And the teacher's not doing that because it's being done, because that's the biggest struggle with doing DRAs or lexile levels. It takes so much time for the teachers to do that. So what you're saying is this tool gives that time back to the teacher in the classroom and the rest of the students.
Exactly. And that's what we're really focused on, is empowering and enabling that teacher to be the human in the room and let the computers do the work. And it's like when you go back to decades ago when we started using ATMs instead of tellers, and they said, oh no, people want to deal with people. I'm like, I think they want to get their money out with just a quick, deposit. So let's let the teachers be the human and let the technology do the work that, and it's easier.
The bottom line is that, I mentioned before, the pandemic has shown a light on so many other things that are needed and perhaps made some other issues that evolved. One of them is the fact that relationships need to be built within the classroom. And now teachers with this tool get that time back to actually sit and work with kids.
Which is what they love, which is what brought them into teaching. And we've had so many staff challenges with teachers and administrators. Why not make teaching fun again and human again, right? That's why people join the teaching profession, because they care and they want to be an adult role model for students.
Right. And so if we can let the computer do some of that grunt work for us, it gives us time for relationship building, which is fantastic. I had some teachers that were in blended learning environments, and they said it was almost like it duplicated the teacher. Like there's 3 or 4 of us now in the room because they're making that happen, and I can work with the people I need to work with. And sometimes they said it's the students at the high end that really needed me.
Right.
So, we forget about that.
And I'm passionate about that too, learning acceleration, because there are students that feel left behind and disengaged because it's not challenging enough.
Right.
And by putting the work and the ownership on the student, they can accelerate as they want also. So it's both.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Serena, we are talking about blended learning, but what about when students are not home? We saw it during the pandemic, but I still see it happening in schools now too. So is that a thing as well?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So I believe that hybrid is here to stay, both in the workplace and the education place. So there's going to be people that are remote. There are people that are traveling for whatever reason, students, is, not just workers. And so Microsoft Teams Room is really exciting and gotten a lot of attention, both on the higher ed as well as the K-12 side, because you want to have an environment that allows people to review material after a lecture. Maybe even parents want to see something so that they can help their student. So Microsoft not only has Teams and all the platforms that help the students learn within a classroom or outside of a classroom, but the hardware. So there are special cameras. There's the Microsoft Surface Hub, which is an interactive panel that goes on the wall that you can see who is remote as well as who is in the classroom. And the idea, both for higher ed, university, and workforce, is that it doesn't matter where you are. You're an equal participant, whether you're in the classroom or you're remote. And this is great for students with all kinds of situations, whether they have an illness or hospital or on quarantine, or and then even if a teacher is, right, that let's not forget, teachers can't always be in the classroom, but yet they're well enough that they could teach. They just can't be exposed in the public. So this hybrid Teams, Microsoft Teams Room is really a powerful tool to continue learning and teaching from wherever.
Yeah, and even I'm thinking like some special services that might be needed, things like that. Sure, yeah.
Right. Parent-teacher conferences, and professional development.
Oh, that's great. Perhaps is there a link we can look at that? You would give us? Yes, that'd be great. So people can visualize that, because it sounds amazing.
It is. And we are setting these up both in higher ed and universities. And it's very, very exciting. There's a lot of appetite, because there's this recognition coming out of the pandemic that this is actually a better way to learn. This is, more flexible. This is meeting students and teachers where they are. So this is both attracting and retaining students and teachers.
Right. And it can help really with, we're seeing so many teachers leaving. So maybe if it's a more flexible environment, they'll want to stay and continue on to contribute.
Yeah, I mean, let's help teachers be excited again about being teachers and in the classroom and interacting. And a lot of the personalization using the technology helps retain teachers, because they see themselves not just as administrators and confused about data or something. They're actually there to inspire, to build relationships with students, which is why a lot of them join the profession.
Exactly. Yes. Oh, well, this is very exciting. I can't wait to see what one of the rooms looks like. Yes.
I'll send you a link with some pictures.
Great. And is it okay if we put that in the show notes?
Yeah.
Yes,
I'll send you publicly available information.
All right. Thank you so much.
So the pandemic, we know that there are struggles with student reading levels with math, because, we don't like to call it learning loss, but there are some deficits that we are seeing. And there, again, with respect to social emotional learning, these are some things that we're seeing. What are some other things that are really some issues we talk about on our podcast? Security is an issue. What are some things that Microsoft is doing in response to some things that we are finding with respect to the pandemic also? Sure.
Thanks for that question. And there's so much. I can't fit it all in one, but I'll say, I don't want to go too deep into security, but we know that education is the most highly targeted industry for attacks. And so we have to help our organizations, our customers beef up their security.
Can I ask you, Serena, why? Do you know why education? Yes.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can probably imagine that teachers are kind and nice and helpful. And so they are primary victims for phishing attacks and for, social engineering, so there's so many access points. And honestly, the back end systems are sometimes not as secure because they have staffing issues, right? It's the budget issues, so there's so many challenges. It's not the same as a corporation where they understand all the risks, right? And they take the right steps. So you have the combination of people being kind, gentle, helpful, providing that entryway, and then you have the back doors that are not necessarily secure as much as possible.
Thanks for that clarification, because I don't think people understand why anyone would want to hack into education.
And it's also attractive data. So student data becomes very valuable because students grow up. And if you can get it when they're young, or you hack into the employee information, right? There's a lot of employees. And so you've got the combination of both student information and employee information that could be vulnerable. So it's so critically important for educational organizations to be diligent about security. And whether it's Microsoft, where we have a full suite of end-to-end solutions, or others, we just need to make sure that our data is protected, and access to systems protection is critical. I'm sure you have lots of podcasts and experts on that, so I don't want to go too much into it, because some of the other things that are important are data and analytics. So what I was talking about in terms of personalizing learning for students requires data. We need to see where the students are. And Jamie, where you were saying how, well, we don't really want to call it a learning loss. I would call it a kind of a sawtooth effect, kind of a variability in competency across grades, levels, students. So students might have excelled in some areas and actually missed out or fallen back on others for so many reasons. Teachers struggle with remote teaching, students struggled with remote learning, but some actually thrive. So we don't want to forget that too. Some of those students that were quiet in class actually might have been more forward and outspoken in the remote setting, with that kind of barrier of the technology between them. So there's just variability. And it used to be that there were 4 or 5 grade levels of difference in a given classroom. We are hearing now that there are like 9 levels. So this huge variety, and there's no way a teacher can teach to every student personally and meet their needs. So it's critical that we have the data, and we can see student engagement, and we can see student performance across all the competencies that are required in a course or a level. And to do this, you can't just do an end of the year, high stakes, summative assessment. You have to be looking at their performance throughout all of the modules, throughout all the content absorption, to see where the students are. And that amount of data, a lot of organizations are not prepared to handle and to report back in an actionable way. I've heard over and over from customers, even if they have the data, we're not sure how to get that out so that people can actually do something with it. So Microsoft is very focused on helping organizations with data. We have something called Open Education Analytics, which is open source, meaning that it's free, it's publicly available, and it's a reference architecture for a modern data estate. So you can use this to set up your data estate, to set up how do we import, export, how do we store, how do we manage our data. And it's on our Azure platform, which is our cloud, super, super secure. That's another reason the security is so critical. And by now, I think people understand that the clouds are actually more secure than on-premise, because on-premise is requiring your staff to manage it. In the cloud, it's the Microsofts and the other customers that are expert in security managing it. So that's another aspect of security. And in that cloud data, we have all kinds of tools that can do machine learning. They can grind the data and churn it and produce dashboards that really help educators, instructional leaders, and even students see where they stand. So the security and the data are critical things that Microsoft is focused on helping our customer organizations.
Right. And I suspect that the visualization is pretty good of that data, because sometimes we just get all of this data and we can't visualize it well.
And that's the difference between a dashboard and just a report.
Right.
So dashboards are customizable. You can use pie graphs, you can use bar graphs, you can use boxes on a page you can put the picture in there. You can, whatever data there is, you can assimilate and you can use in a visual format. But a lot of that is up to the individual organizations. So Microsoft certainly we have systems integrators, we have managed service providers, we have lots of partners that can help personalize that. I call it like the last mile of the data. So every district uses different data schema, formats, names. So, it's helpful to engage a third party that can make it personal for that organization and create the visuals that are going to be the most beneficial.
Right. So that people can take action on that data.
Right. Actionable data.
Yes.
That's
Move in
the
the
key.
right direction. Yes,
It's only
absolutely.
informative if you actually do something with it. If it's just sitting there, then what's the point?
Right.
Whether it's
True.
Yeah, at the technology level or even at the classroom level.
And Jamie, that's so true. And that's why with the tools we're building and we can help organizations do it, the next step is teachers don't have time to be data scientists. They don't have time to absorb all this data and information. What we can do is take that data and have AI, artificial intelligence, use the data to figure out what content that student, each student, should use next and create a personalized playlist. So instead of the teacher saying, oh, Johnny needs to do this, this, and this module, the technology can do that for you. So you don't even have to look at the dashboard. You can go about your instruction, your classroom activities, your collaborative spaces, while the students' playlists are generated and the student can go farther ahead. One of the things I suggest is that the beginning of a week, the teacher meet with each student for a few minutes one-on-one and come to an agreement as to what the student's going to accomplish for that week. And then they go through it. And the next week they're saying, oh, I got this far and I completed all my agreements, or oh, I missed this one, I need help with it. Or I did even more, I kept going. And if the technology can keep filling up that playlist for the student and they learn executive function, keeping their commitments, managing their time and working through it while building relationships and hopefully getting inspired in the classroom setting.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest struggle is getting that time. The teachers don't have the time to conference one-on-one, to do small group instruction. They don't often have the time, or when they think they have it planned, something else happens. So this way, all of those playlists are on the ready for the students. Then this way, that conversation between them, those one-on-ones, those small groups, can actually happen and be a much more a rich conversation, and those goals going much further as well.
And there's psychology behind it.
Yes, yes. And the students have devices now, right? So how do you use that?
Exactly. And, I noticed when I was a principal, if kids were just setting a goal, writing it down, and then keeping track of it themselves, they usually exceeded it. So if what you're saying with the teacher just sitting down, you want to please that person.
Right.
And you're just moving forward. The psychology is so positive.
Yes.
Of what's going on to build those relationships. And the students are taking the learning into their own hands.
Yeah, and there's really a focus on the teacher-student relationship like never before. Because if a teacher's just doing direct instruction, they're not necessarily connecting with each person. The student doesn't have a voice. If you have those one-on-one connections once a week, at least one-on-one, and you set up these contracts, these agreements, and the student knows they're being monitored, they're being watched, they get to report out at the end of the week, I did this, and they're getting badges along the way. We're doing all these things to encourage engagement and ownership and performance, which leads to outcomes.
Right. And it is accountability. It's built in. It's just the reason I go to Weight Watcher meetings, because I have to talk.
I was going to say, I need to do that. And it's the same concept.
It makes a difference.
I have to report out.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, there really is no other way in order for that to be sustained. The students need to have that intrinsic value. And when teachers are no longer the sage on the stage and instead that guide on the side, coaching, cheerleading, giving them, helping them set goals, then the ball is in the student court. And it only allows for that to grow if this is continuing, for them to use this in their everyday lives. We need to have people in our future who are self-starters, who initiate, are self-motivators, and we can only nourish that when it's happening right from the elementary level and on.
100%.
Yeah.
You are right on. You get the vision. And these are the executive function. These are the soft skills that employers want to see.
Exactly. And you're building them authentically.
Yes. It's so I feel like, the pandemic, where it was tragic in so many ways, and we have so much healing to do, there were these silver linings. There was trends that have been accelerated that we can ride and take advantage of for the benefit of our students.
Yeah, I mean, certain things happened because of the pandemic, but a lot of things issues were already there. And so now solutions are being created to address those, when otherwise, I mean, we could have just kept on going and not really had the focus on these. So we certainly appreciate that Microsoft is certainly addressing those and shining the light, and more importantly, finding the solutions for some of these issues.
Yeah, and we want to be the partner for our customers. We aren't, a supplier or vendor. We want to be the partner that is enabling the same goals as our customers.
Absolutely. So Serena, we always ask our guests the same question. In all of your work, like in the school district and in the virtual school, and now with Microsoft, what has become clear to you?
Oh, I feel like we've been talking about it. What is clear to me is how important it is to nurture the next generation, because that's our legacy. And I 100% believe that only technology has the answer, and in a very positive way, not in a creepy way. We don't have enough staff in schools. Like, this is all coming together. We don't have enough staff. We now have crossed that my mindset of technology versus education. They're one and the same now. We need to leverage technology to help students. And that's the only way we're going to help avoid losing a generation of a workforce. And it's the only way we're going to build the workforce of tomorrow that is agile, versatile, and ready to take on the challenges that we don't even know exist yet.
That's right. That's right. Yes, it is exciting to see all of the things that are happening. Do you have any advice for districts that are training their teachers? What can you tell them to just keep this momentum going?
One of the things that's been disappointing to me is that teachers have relied so much on non-technical means for classroom management, for education. And so even the teachers that are graduating from teacher school, like in the last few years, when everyone else is using technology fluidly, they didn't necessarily integrate that into the classroom. So as we're educating teachers and training them and integrating them into our environments, let's help them to leverage technology in positive ways, not be afraid of it, and engage to embrace the student relationship. It doesn't separate it, it makes it more powerful. So learn the right lessons from the pandemic, and learn the right lessons from what we've been through, right? So, one of the things I say is, don't waste a good crisis.
Yes.
So the pandemic was a crisis. Let's take that crisis and learn the right lessons. The right lesson is not, let's go back to the way it was. The way it wasn't really working, if we're going to be honest. Let's use those lessons, take the best of what we learned, and make it even better. Because teachers weren't necessarily prepared to teach remotely. Some of them learned throughout the process and got better. Let's take that get better mentality and continue to get better, to revolutionize education so that our students, let's just fix the problems that we know have been existing for so long with the new tools and just mindset that we've gained.
Microsoft has some modules to help teachers, don't you?
Absolutely. Learn.
Yes.
It's called Microsoft Learn.
Oh, well, there we go.
Microsoft Learn is professional development, and it's accessible for teachers. There are so many things. So from a technology, if you're the IT side, going into the Edu blog, there's sections for teachers, for instructors at different levels, as well as the IT side. Microsoft Learn is a wealth of professional development. And there's LinkedIn Learning. There's so many ways of absorbing this and getting up to speed. There's badges, there's certifications in LinkedIn Learning as well. So I can provide you some materials after the fact if you want to post them on your website. I can provide some links, but there's so many opportunities, and education, Microsoft Education is an entity, and we are here to support the industry.
That's fantastic. We'll make sure that we share all of those learning opportunities in our description as well. I've also seen the nano learning happening in LinkedIn as well. And I think that's a new direction for professional development, is just making sure that, I mean, we know we have to do it in the classroom, right? Learning has to be chunked. It has to be chunked for adults as well. So I think, just in terms of our brains, our time, the brain-based research. And so I think that's something I'm seeing Microsoft is doing on LinkedIn and giving it really easily accessible tips and tricks.
And even we're even doing, they call snacks, learning snacks on TikTok. And I'll say that all of the traditional tools like Word and Excel and our new traditional tool, Teams, are constantly being updated. So if you think you know what those tools were 2 years ago, even, they have been refreshed, updated for the new environment. And you can learn about new features going into LinkedIn or TikTok. And they'll be, look for Mike Tholfsen. He is our amplifier of everything Microsoft Edu. He's
terrific. He is.
Terrific, yeah. You should get him on your podcast.
I am actually. Yes, we will. I talked to him already at one point.
Good.
So we'll get
Good. So those tools are being refreshed constantly, and we've added so many new features. Teams does have this video conferencing, but it's so much more. It's a collaborative tool. It's a classroom management tool. It's even like an LMS Lite where you can put your your playlist and content through it. But it's just so powerful and valuable for both teachers, students, and beyond.
Serena, this discussion has been very enlightening, and we've talked about so many of the challenges, but I love that you've brought solutions to us and ideas to move us all forward. So thank you so much. You've been a delightful guest. It's been so fun to have you here today.
It's been fun to talk with you both, Jerri and Jamie. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for listening. And if you would like to stay linked up, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify, and subscribe to us on YouTube.